please. Before, I guess, another introduction, behind the scenes, Miriam Hernandez-Gabriel is providing translation services, and we want to thank her, as well as Brian Penny, Cindy Cummings, Abraham Diaz, and Trish Merrick, who are all here helping with the chat feature tonight. And again, I'm Andy Van Fleet, principal here at Fowler, along with Associate Principal Marnie Watts, and she will co-facilitate with me as we move through the evening. Next slide, please. Our goals for tonight are to share more about the details of what the first 9 weeks will look like for students who are learning remotely. Some of this, if we have joined in on the community presentations, may look similar, but there's other items as well as we are narrowing down into our professional development week and preparing to open school in 2 weeks. So with that, the idea of what remote instruction is going to look like, it will be different than a traditional classroom setting, so we'll talk through that. And we'll answer questions that come up that aren't addressed in this presentation. Next slide, please. So we don't need to go into depth, but there were a plethora, dozens and dozens of folks who came together, core teachers, administrators, elective teachers, learning specialists, in combination with a lot of parent feedback from the spring and through our community events as we move through the summer, that helped develop a plan that would allow us to stay in a comprehensive distance online model if we need to for 18 weeks or up to a year, but will also allow us to pivot into a hybrid very seamlessly, so student cohorts can stay the same and we keep that family feel as we move forward. So thank you to all those different groups that assisted. Next slide, please. As we came together to take a look at what school needed to look like, the #1 priority for us clearly was safety. Realizing that as we started building the schedule, we desperately wanted this to be in a hybrid, because the sooner we can get into a hybrid scenario, the sooner we'll be able to start moving towards full student body inclusion in all of our classes every day. Now, we've got a long way to go with the metrics to get there, but building a model that allowed us to keep this 35 square foot kind of boundary, 6-foot bubble in all directions around students necessitated that we look at only having half of our students in the classroom at a time. Otherwise, we can't meet that metric and that protective bubble around students. Thus, the hybrid is kind of formed with the intent of half of the student body being in the building on any given day for core learning, even though we will be looking at electives online the entire time. That's the only way to pull off a hybrid type model. So 18 is our target core classroom. That can range from 15 to 20 for when we get back into hybrid, and will allow us to continue instruction again seamlessly with the same teacher and the same students that were in the online version. Next slide, please. Additional measures once we get back into school, and this has been a topic of conversation, what does it look like to keep students safe? Well, we just talked about the bubble, the boundary within the classroom, but there's also going to be social distancing expectations when students arrive to school. So we'll have a daily screening set up both on the bus and at the door, looking for signs or symptoms, temperature. We actually have a huge blueprint that once we get into hybrid that we'll be following in detail. Social distancing guidelines, contract tracing, cohort logging, to make sure that if we do get back and there is exposure into a cohort, we can immediately be able to communicate with anyone who may or may not have come in contact with any of our students. So again, very detailed plan here to make sure that we are creating a safe environment when we get back into the building. Next slide, please. So within that blueprint, hand washing routines are really important. Many of our classrooms have hand washing stations inside them to help facilitate that. Classrooms that do not will have easy access to hand sanitizer stations or restrooms, other sinks that we have available to make sure that we are doing the best we can to keep a germ-free environment. Essential staff only. This is going to be a departure. We love having our PSO here and other push-in support folks. But if we get back into that hybrid, it will be strictly essential staff, our classified staff, our teaching staff, here to support our students, again, to protect our children and try to minimize any kind of exposure possible. We will have specific entry routes, exit routes, very much like what we're seeing when we go into some of our big stores right now, to keep a traffic flow that minimizes any kind of concern or contamination. Next slide, please. At this point, I will pass over to Ms. Watts to explain a little bit more about the cohort setup and some of our class schedules.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Marnie Watts, Associate Principal. It's nice to be here tonight. Andy talked a little bit about kind of the safety precautions and that kind of thing. I'm going to move into a little bit about what school might look like, what school will look like in this more comprehensive distance learning model. But I wanted to start by talking a little bit about how students were grouped in their cohorts. So we basically broke them down by their schooling option. We had two options, either the 100% online or the hybrid option. And so regardless of the fact that we're all starting in this online model right now, students are still cohorted by that first choice. From there, we broke the students down by their last name. So students with the last name that begins A through L will have their core classes on Mondays and Tuesdays, and their non-core classes on Thursdays and Fridays. Students whose last names begin M through Z will be opposite of that. So their non-core classes will be on Mondays and Tuesdays, and they would have their core classes on Thursdays and Fridays. And really that's kind of the biggest difference between the A through L and the M through Z groupings, is when their core classes are. When we get back to on-site learning, the core classes will be the days that students would be on site. So that's kind of an important fact for you to be aware of. There were a few rare exceptions that we had to make based on maybe siblings in the same household with different last names or extreme circumstances. But for the most part, that's the breakdown of the cohort groupings. Next slide, please. So I want to walk through a sample schedule of a student on their core day. So this would be what a typical day might look like for a student when they have their core classes. So again, that would be back-to-back days, either on Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday. Regardless of the day of the week, the actual bell schedule, those times stay the same. So on a core day, a student would begin their day at 9 o'clock with what we're calling a morning meeting. So they would need to check in. The morning meeting would happen. The focus of our morning meetings, which I'll get into a little bit later, is around social emotional learning, community building, building up life skills, kind of some of those important things that kids need to learn and be aware of, that oftentimes happen throughout the day in traditional schooling. Following the morning meeting, they would move into their first block of a core, which would be either language arts, social studies, math, or science, one of the 4 cores. After that, they would have a lunch and kind of a break time. You'll notice there the time for lunch and what we called kind of movement break is an hour and a half, which may seem like a long time, but we wanted to provide enough time for students to go to the school to pick up their lunch if they need to do that, and to actually just take a break from school and get some movement. We felt that was really important, since they're at home, they're learning online, which is very different than being in the traditional school setting where they're passing from class to class and having lots of social interaction. That would change if we were on site. The times would be slightly different. After lunch, they would have their second core class of the day. So again, depending on either math, science, language arts, or social studies, they'll have two of their 4 core classes in one day. And then the end of the day, the 2 o'clock to 2:45 time frame is what we're calling flex time. And I'll speak a little bit more about this in a couple slides as well, but to give you a little bit of an idea, it's an opportunity for students to get additional support from teachers. Teachers will be available to provide, help with homework or clarification on something that they went over that day in class, or maybe the former day. It's just flexible time that students can meet with any of their teachers. Next slide, please. So this is a Wednesday schedule. Now, Wednesday is kind of the off day of the whole week. Students will only have one actual scheduled class that they need to show up for on Wednesdays. And that's going to be, it's what we're calling a 0 period. And it's from 9 to 9:30. And it's really kind of a check-in time. Again, it's just they'll have time to check in with one of their teachers, kind of make sure they're set up for the day, because you'll notice the rest of the day is really time for them to work independently on coursework from the previous days, or their core classes, their elective PE class, whatever they might have to work on. Their classes are not scheduled on Wednesdays. So we have come up with kind of a recommended schedule for them. We believe that it's important for students to kind of try to maintain a schedule even on a Wednesday when maybe their classes aren't scheduled. It's still a school day. So we've mapped out our recommendations to kind of stay on that same kind of bell schedule, and maybe just map out 30 minutes at a time for each core class, where they can work on their coursework from the previous days or the previous week, do a little studying and that kind of thing. So that's mapped out there from 9 to 2:45, just like the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Fridays. Next slide, please. So this sample schedule is about a non-core day, what a schedule would look like for a student on their non-core day. So you'll notice the same times are there scheduled in their day. The bell schedule's the same. They're still expected to show up to their classes, but their classes on their non-core days will be an elective class, a PE class, and possibly they may have a third class if they are scheduled into an intervention or any kind of academic support class. So there's 3 classes on their non-core days, but if they don't have an intervention or a support class, they would only be scheduled into 2 of those. So their third class for that day would be independent work time again. So if you happen to see a hole on your child's schedule, it probably isn't a mistake. It would be, that's the reason they didn't have the intervention or support class. And then they still have the flex time, check-in time at the end of the day from 2 to 2:45. So opportunity again to check in with any of their teachers if they need additional support, have any questions, anything like that. Next slide, please. So this slide here is related to the ODE recommendations for synchronous versus asynchronous class time for students during this comprehensive distance learning time. So you'll notice for middle schoolers, grades 4 through 8, the recommendation is that they have 2 hours and 30 minutes per day scheduled with a teacher, that's synchronous time. So when we speak of synchronous time, we're really talking about that time that students are scheduled with a teacher. It may not be 60 minutes of live, Google Hangout sessions, but it's some kind of interactive, engaging activities, instruction with a teacher. That could be either a live session, or it may be an interactive chat or activity through Canvas or some other kind of learning app. So there's a variety of ways that students will kind of participate in that synchronous time, but it may not always be for that whole 60 minutes in front of a screen with their teacher. It's probably going to look different for different classes, different teachers, different days of the week even. Next slide, please. So regarding attendance and grading. So this is something that's very different than the springtime. This year, students are going to be graded, not just the pass, pass or incomplete, but they will receive letter grades for their classes, all of their scheduled classes, with the exception of the morning meeting time and the Wednesday 0 period. Those classes will be a pass or no pass, as they won't have the level of coursework that their core classes, PE and electives, would have. Classes are mandatory. So if a student is scheduled in a class, which they all will be scheduled in classes every day, the expectation is that they are attending class, hopefully on time, checking in, attending. We ask that if students will miss a class or if they're sick, that the same thing as when we're in traditional schooling, it's really good for us to know, if possible. We still have the attendance line that you can call in. Students can let their teachers know, but attendance is really important. We really need to maintain those connections. And so the expectation is for students to attend all of their classes. The flex time, as I mentioned earlier, those times in the day, students will not be actually scheduled with a teacher. So you won't see a teacher, your student having a teacher during that time. So it's not graded, but we highly recommend, highly encourage students to take advantage of that time, because it's an opportunity. It's really a great opportunity, and one that we didn't really have when we were in traditional school. Their day was filled with classes. So in this model, we have some extra time in the day where they can check in with teachers to get extra support. So we really want to take advantage of that. All right, next slide, please. So morning meetings, what is this morning meeting time about? So the goal of the morning meeting time is really about building community, building connections, providing an opportunity for students and teachers to kind of get to know each other, to provide a safe space. And then the focus will be on social, emotional learning and life skills. We believe that students need to feel connected and have a sense of belonging, feel valued, in order to even really want to engage in class. So especially in this kind of environment where the social interaction is so limited, we really feel like it's important to provide space for students to get to know each other, and also for teachers to get to know their students. So that's going to be a big focus of the morning meeting time. Initially, it'll be a lot about building community, but over time, they'll build on that and build in discussions and activities related to real life issues, related to like self-reflection, self-awareness, tolerance, equity, bias, racism, that kind of thing. So, but in order to have those kinds of hard, difficult conversations, there has to be a sense of safety and trust. So over time, that happens. The structure of this morning meeting time will be using the community circle structure. So you'll be hearing more about that as the year goes on as well. And in addition to our strong belief that this is really important, it's also been prioritized by the Department of Education of Oregon that we prioritize social emotional learning into our comprehensive distance learning plan this year. Next slide, please. Whoops, back one more. There you go, thank you. Flex time and afternoon check-ins. I kind of touched on this, but I'll just kind of repeat myself. So the flex time afternoon check-ins are scheduled Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 2 o'clock to 2:45. Students will not be actually scheduled with a teacher during this time, but it's a time that students can connect with a teacher, any of their teachers, if they have questions or need extra support, extra help. This time, the teachers may also initiate a meeting time with a student if they want to, if they believe they want to work with maybe a small group or individuals that need extra help, maybe to review a concept learn or something like that, maybe just to answer questions. It could be a small group discussion. This is also going to be a time where students can receive math support at their ability level. So if they're an advanced student, or maybe they need some additional support, they would be able to get help from a math teacher during this time as well. And then just also an opportunity to get feedback from teachers, to collaborate. It's just going to be some extra time for students to get additional support. Next slide, please. All right, I'm passing it back to Mr. Van Fleet.
Thank you very much. So to go a little bit more into the electives, and I think Ms. Watts did a great job of explaining kind of the two different branches, the core side and the elective side. And we talked a little bit about the 35 square feet in core. When students are working out in a PE class, singing and projecting a lot of volume at one time in choir, some band instruments, it changes the metrics necessary. So that again put us in a unique situation where we had to take a look at electives completely separately, which is again kind of the rationale of why the electives will occur in the online only environment until we are in a less concerning COVID situation. So the PE electives, as we talked about, twice a week, interactive sessions as well. So students will still be checking in, even if it's a physical education class. We're probably not going to be working out live online, but we'll be getting some feedback on technique, and there will be a lot of health elements woven into that PE world. So some of those conversations will be very much more about the health side than the actual activity side. And all of our instructors, art through performing arts, through PE, will also be available through those flex hours as we're talking about our journals or our assignments or our needs. So they will also still be able to access that afternoon support. So students can kind of pick and choose where they need to go to meet with their teachers and get their needs met. Next slide, please. And in this environment, and again, it was alluded to earlier, students will have that one elective class, and they forecasted in the spring. We are doing our absolute best to look at what is in our Florida virtual curriculum that we're working with this year, understanding that there are a few electives that we won't be able to offer, pottery being one that was incredibly popular for some of our students, but in this environment we just can't do. So as we look at those type electives that we can't offer in the distance environment, we're going down the list and trying to match up our students with the next selection that they pick for electives to try to keep the interest as high as we possibly can. There may be a need as we move forward to kind of look at how do we get some specific supplies to students. If I'm doing art from home, is there a way to provide some unique equipment for students who are in an art class? Those are some of the things that we're looking through to make sure that we partner with our teachers and students have access to what they need to access their electives successfully online in this environment. Next slide, please. So for 6th grade, if our incoming 6th grade students have signed up for band or choir, those are year-long courses. If we didn't sign up for band or choir, we are going to be utilizing our art program, and the STEM offering will be coding. So we used to have introductory STEM class, ed tech. It's going to be converted a little to coding for this year. And it should be a pretty good launch point for our students to keep connected with STEM as we start moving towards the engineering field, and when we get back into hybrid to resume our Lego robotics and some of those other engineering programs that are much more hands-on and can only be recreated in our space. So this is a way to keep that STEM work alive in this environment. Next slide, please. So for 7th and 8th grade students, again, band and choir will be year-long programs. In addition, we will be offering Spanish, art, literature for fun, and drama for our students. Pause for a moment. Next slide, please.
All right, so those were kind of our elective offerings. In addition to the electives, we have some support classes for students that need a little additional support in reading, language development, or to meet their IEP goals and specially designed instruction. So students that qualify for any of those classes will receive, like for example, if they need reading support, if they have a reading intervention class, they would receive the reading instruction in a separate class that would be scheduled on their non-core days. So that would kind of be that third block for them on the non-core days. Doesn't take the place of an elective, it doesn't take the place of PE. They would be able to get those classes, and this would just be an addition. So they wouldn't have their independent practice time on their non-core days. Still the opportunity for flex time as well. Next slide, please. So regarding our English language development, students with emerging English skills would receive targeted ELD support with the ELD specialist on their non-core days. So the same as for a reading support class, they would receive their ELD instruction, targeted instruction in a separate class on their non-core days. Students with intermediate or advanced English skills would continue to build on those skills through their core classes with the ELD specialist working in consultation with the core teachers to ensure that the language standards are embedded and addressed in the core classes. And students would also have the opportunity for additional language support and or content support during those flex times. If they needed a little extra support from either the ELD specialist or maybe an instructional assistant, they could get some extra support during that flex time as well. Next slide, please. And the same is really true for students on IEPs that have specially designed instruction. They may receive their specially designed instruction in a variety of ways. In some cases, it may be an additional class scheduled with their learning specialist, again on the non-core day. Their learning specialist will also be working in consultation with their core teachers to ensure that their IEP goals are being addressed and their differentiation and needs are being met in their core classes. Again, in some cases, they could get additional support during that flex time either potentially with a learning specialist, possibly an instructional assistant, maybe small group instruction, again, during that flex time. So all three of those examples, whether it's a reading support class, an ELD class, or a special ed class, it's in addition to an elective and a PE, which is really, really awesome because there are, we were able to preserve that for our students with this model to where all students will get PE and an elective and won't lose anything if they need additional support, which we're really happy about. Next slide, please.
Okay, we've just been talking a little bit about differentiation, so we'll transition into math. All of our students this year will be taking math through, all of our students in period will be taking their courses through Florida Virtual and through Canvas, which is the learning management system that replaces Google Classroom. Within that, our students are going to be at a variety of math levels. We were in a really difficult position at the end of last year without being able to do our standard SBAC assessments, our iReady assessments at the end of the year, to make sure that we are properly placing kids in their level of math. This couldn't be more true for sixth grade that stopped their year early, and we would have to go all the way back to like a fifth grade or potentially even a fourth grade score to try to guess at a math placement. So all of our students in math in the first week of our school year will be joining the classrooms, and it will be just an introduction to how does online learning work, and that'll be across the board of creating community in our classrooms, how do we function in Canvas and Florida Virtual. Come the second week of school, about September 21st-ish, we will be administering over that next week or two iReady assessments, which will help confirm whether or not we had the accurate placement for students that were going into 7th and 8th grade, to make sure that we match them with the right math content within Florida Virtual so they can be successful and be challenged. And for sixth graders right now that we couldn't give any assessments to in the elementary as they move into this year, we will make sure that with that assessment, we determine, yes, sixth grade is correct placement, or are we looking at an advanced class for those students? How are we going to support students as we move through? Well, because we're in the cohort situation, we've got the math science band, the language arts social studies band. There are a couple opportunities here. And we'll get into this a little bit more starting now and through the next few slides. But the way instruction is taking place in a virtual environment is very different than the traditional classroom. So our instructors will be working through their in-service weeks and on each Wednesday to talk through the various curriculum, the needs, the lessons, making sure that any video tutorials are in place and properly loaded into Florida Virtual so students can go access their learning lesson, whether they're in a sixth grade math, a seventh grade advanced, a geometry class, anywhere across the spectrum. So when we log in and we're working through our assignments, be it at home or be it in the classroom, even though I might be in a sixth grade class with one specific teacher, there might be two levels, potentially even a third level of math occurring at that exact same time. So the instructor will be there to support, whether it's online or in person, and there are going to be additional supports in place. The afternoon check-in session has been intentionally created so students can go access that core teacher or jump into another math teacher's classroom as well that may be spending a little bit more time on one specific subject. So we've got the in-class, we've got the after school check-in opportunities, and on that alternating day where Ms. Watts talked earlier about there will be a gap in many schedules, that's yet another place where we can push into additional math support. So we've got three ways to get additional support if the math lesson that's been created and the steps aren't clear enough and there's questions that come with that. So the Wednesdays, again, our teachers will be collaborating, identifying what mini lessons do we need to push out to support students, where are we seeing questions about the curriculum, and doing our absolute best to make sure that we are supporting students at every step in that process. Next slide, please. So I've talked about this a little bit already. The traditional model, the model that we are all familiar with, that we received growing up. I'm a student seated in my desk, in my row, watching the teacher as the facilitator of all knowledge, writing on the whiteboard while we frantically took notes, or hearing a lecture, or passing out the materials to us when they're ready to pass them out. The flip to that, and what is so different in this online environment and model, is this teacher role from that direct presenter now comes into a guide, now comes into more of a coach. So once my lessons are loaded into the system, students access them at home, can work on them, come into the class and work on them, ask live questions, and now I'm sitting and supporting, I'm troubleshooting. Where were the questions that you had from the previous work? So it's a different build of the model. We can still cover the amount of content we need to. And in a lot of ways, it can be much more successful for students because they can replay a video, rewatch a lesson, and it is not dependent on, I have to be in the class paying attention 100% of the time, because we know our middle school learners. I know my daughters in middle school, they might be present for 14 seconds and then they're thinking about something else for the next 20 minutes. This model will allow students to go back through the curriculum, maybe even repeat an assessment if they didn't do well, and have extra exposure if they didn't get it the first time. So there's a big upside to that piece, but it is a major shift in terms of thinking, because that is not the education that we were exposed to, but that is the online model, and that's what our students will be looking at. So parents, if you are supporting your learner during one of their live sessions, you may see an instructor check in with students, ask about the homework they did, put up a prompt. Students then participate, they share, we may even be able to get to different breakout rooms where students can go into yet even a smaller area, work on a project, talk together, come back, share out. So there's going to be different variations in what that role looks like, but it probably will very rarely be me talking to a computer screen for 60 minutes as an instructor. Next slide, please. Okay, so what will students see? What will they see when they sit down to log in? This is an introduction slide to what Canvas will look like when students log in. We got used to last year working with Google Classroom, or Seesaw if we were at the elementary level. So this is the platform that takes the place of Google Classroom, takes the place of Seesaw. We can see as I go log into my Canvas app on my iPad, which by the way is probably right now or may have already been pushed out to those iPads that are on and connected to wireless or to an internet. And we'll be able to see that we have my student account and a dashboard. There's the modules that are in here, the classes, the courses, and there's even nice indicators that kind of show, hey, all items are complete. So we won't go too deep into this. This is just an example that as I log in, it looks like a standard website, standard platform, much like the Google Classroom, Google Suite, that students have been navigating very similarly prior. Next slide, please. In Florida Virtual, the curriculum that we are working with this year that is kind of integrated very seamlessly with Canvas will allow modules that will look like this. Now, each one's different in each subject, but the idea behind this is if I'm sitting down as a student, I've been working through a lesson that's been populated here. I may have checked in with my teacher if there were some questions. I may be doing this live during that session. I may be doing this module at home. I'm learning a science lesson here, and on the right-hand side, what's really nice is we have these formative assessment options. So I've gone through my learning progress. I might be at home and my teacher's not available right now. I can attempt to try to answer these questions, demonstrate my knowledge, check my understanding. And as I drag and drop one of these boxes into the table to the right, it's going to tell me whether I did it right or wrong. A lot of times there's going to be a redo attempt, or I can move things around until I get it right. So there's an interactive component piece here that helps support the learner. Many of the modules will look like this. Many will look different as well. And within Florida Virtual, our instructors will be going through over the next 2 weeks, looking at all of the standard progressions that we need to go through to make sure that students are on pace for the next year, or to make sure students are prepared for their high school experience. And we may realize, wow, I don't think I like this unit. I don't like this lesson. It doesn't meet the standard that we're trying to get to. So I'm going to partner with my other 7th grade teachers, 6th grade teachers, and I'm going to build a better model. I'm going to build a better unit, and we're going to upload it into Canvas, into Florida Virtual, and the students will progress through that assignment. So it's a virtual piece. It's not a purely canned curriculum that's just stuck. There is a lot of flexibility, and our instructors will be spending an incredible amount of time putting their own spin on these assignments to make sure that they're, again, interesting, relevant, and advance our students' skill sets to be prepared for their 7th grade, 8th grade, or 9th grade experience. Sorry, that was a little long-winded. Next slide, please. And I've already talked about this. I led in with the previous slide, this supplementation idea of being able to adjust those models as we need to enrich the curriculum that's pre-built into many of our Florida virtual classes. Next slide, please.
All right, so one of the big questions that we've been getting is, when are we going to get our schedule? Right about this time of summer is when kids get really excited about finding out who their teachers are, what their schedule is, what classes they have, and who's in their classes. And we are just as excited as they are. However, generally scheduling takes us a few months. We start in May and usually finish right about now. This year, we have just got started about 2 weeks ago. So we are working, really hard to get them all done, but they're not there yet. So we're going as fast as we can, and we will share those out just as soon as we have them ready. They'll be shared via student view and parent view. And our target date is September 8th, which I know is late. We are hopeful that it might be sooner, but we didn't want to get anybody's hopes up and overpromise and underserve. So we'll communicate out as we get closer, and be sure to let people know when they can check. But that is how students will get their schedule. So we really appreciate your patience. We know there's a ton of questions and maybe a little bit of anxiety and probably excitement around school too. And I think once students get their schedule, that's kind of when they know it's time to go back, and they get even more excited. So like I said, we're right there with you, and we'll get those out as soon as we can. Next slide, please. I wanted to let you know that breakfast and lunch will be provided throughout the, this first 9 weeks as we're in this comprehensive distance learning mode. Breakfast and lunch will continue to be provided at the secondary schools, and more information will come out about the food service options and that kind of thing. We'll get that out as soon as we have more of the details. I did want to let you know if you or your family are in need of other resources or support. Miriam Hernandez-Gabriel is our family liaison, and her contact information is here for you. She is a wonderful resource, and we encourage you to reach out to her for any needs that you may have, and we'll do whatever we can to support. If you have technology needs or you get stuck on anything related to technology, Abraham Diaz is our in-house technology expert. very sharp with the technology, and he's an awesome support. So his contact information is there for you as well. We'll make sure we have both of them listed on our website, so that's easily accessible should you have a need there. Next slide, please. And then we just know that there's, probably still so many questions out there about, school and just a lot of questions. So we're going to do what we can to continue to share additional information. We'll also have some video tutorials that we'll have ready for people to kind of view. I know that the schedules are probably going to look different for students, so we're going to, want to walk students and parents through even how to read your schedule and gosh, like, how do I meet my teacher on the first day of school? All of that information will be coming. So, just everybody take a breath and we'll get all of that information out, and we'll just be communicating through our weekly and our website and let you know about any further informational sessions or tutorials that are available. I did want to highlight that Thursday, September 3rd, which is a week from tonight, I believe, it will be our 6th grade information night. We'll have an information session specific to our 6th grade families because we weren't able to do that in the spring, and we realize that there may be different kinds of questions for our 6th graders and their parents if they're new to middle school. So we want to provide that space and opportunity. And then mark your calendars for September 14th. That is the first day of school for everyone, and we are excited to get everybody back going again. So next slide, please.
Okay, it looks like we've kind of come to the end of our formal presentation. We have about 10 minutes remaining still. So if there are additional questions in the chat that we couldn't answer as we were moving through, or if there are some big themes that maybe would be good to address or answer for the greater audience, this is a great time for that. And as we transition there, I want to remind everyone that if we joined late, or if there's a future session that we'd like to get to, whether it's for Fowler Middle School or any other district event that's being hosted on Zoom like this, we do have a youtube.ttsdschools.org channel where these events will be recorded, and we can go back and watch them to catch up if we were unavailable to catch the live presentations. And I don't know if I introduced or gave some appreciation for Thor Kuhn, who is our master technician who helped set up this evening and is kind of doing some control work behind the scenes. So thank you very much, Thor. All right, with that, our moderators in the chat, are there any questions that we need to unmute and ask for the greater good?
Mr. Van Fleet, we do have questions about if the TWE schedule would be different, and also specifically about the Black Lives Matter and racism and what material will be taught.
Okay, so let's start with the TWE response. Our TWE classes are in cohorts. So if I am in my math science band, for example, at the 6th grade level, my math will be in Spanish, my science would be in English, my language arts and social studies would be in Spanish. So that's what that would look like from the cohort piece. Now we do have some TWE families, TWE students who are in the online only component. So our instructors have basically 4 cohorts each that they're working with over the course of the week as we move through our progression. And one of those cohorts is kind of going to be online only throughout the entire semester. So they will get the exact same feel and schedule as non-TWE. So we've been very thoughtful about that process. The one complication in this is at the 8th grade level, we do have instructors that we're splitting between Fowler and Hazelbrook and their TWE program. So those instructors will still be available online just as much as they would be if they were 100% in our building, because it's very easy to collaborate on the computer screen. But for those specific classes at the 8th grade, we would have our 2 instructors in Spanish language arts and Spanish science. They would be partnered with English, social studies, and mathematics. So that's the only deviation there. It would be a 3-person team instead of a 2-person team at the other 2 TWE levels. And as far as the Black Lives Matter and many of our other affinity groups, we are in partnership right now with district office, our equity coordinator, in developing some modules to make sure students are aware of equity in our community. And right now we are in obviously a potentially a very polarizing environment. And we are going to do our absolute best to make sure that our students learn respectful discourse and how they can vary in opinion, yet still respect each other, which is an important life skill. So these modules are being created and will come out through some of those homeroom lessons, along with the rest of our PBIS efforts, citizenship, and just different habits of mind that will help us stay focused, focus on school, stay regulated, work within a community. I like to think of our community structure and session much like a family. I have disagreements with my daughters, and having rational, thoughtful conversations where we can be respectful of each other is highly, highly important, not just for middle school, but I think as we move on through our adult lives. So those modules are being created.
There was one other question about math instruction. So will there be any math instruction that will be live, or will it be through the Florida virtual curriculum?
There will be live components, but there will also be a lot of, I don't know want to use the word reliance, but a lot of the effort is in the build of our math progressions through Florida Virtual. So there's going to be much more in focus on creating lessons within Florida Live where the videos might be shared and taped in advance, because obviously we're looking at over the course of a day, 3 hours instead of 6 hours. So a lot of that work goes into creating the Florida Virtual. And then as our instructors realize, okay, I'm here for questions. If you have questions about the math lesson that's going on, that's when we'll get more of that direct live support to help assist. So it's not going to be, like I said, a 60-minute lecture on the spot. I am seeing a couple of questions in here just around respect and concern around political bias. I can assure you our intent as we look at what we're going to be doing with our community meetings, what we would do with just our morning announcements if we're live, it's about respect in general. I am fully committed to realizing and partnering with our entire community that there are a lot of different perspectives. At the end of the day, my mission is to help make sure that all students are just respectful of each other, supportive of each other, and to ensure that we're not a divisive school. This is a place to come to socialize, to get the content, get the core that we need to be able to progress and move on to the high school in a highly successful way. A lot of the awesome lessons that our PBS team, that our counseling team, that our administrative team have been working on historically, both at Fowler Middle School and across the district, are just about tolerance, about support, about being a good person. And these are those main values that I think every student should have. So I appreciate that question. Thank you.
And I would just add, in addition, that the morning meeting time that we talked about, and that I think some of the questions are coming around kind of what's going to happen during that time. I spoke about really starting, really like building community and building like a safe place to have maybe some more deeper conversations about real life issues. A lot of the structure that we'll be using is really more around like conversational. It's not like we have a set curriculum per se, but we'll be using a lot of like guiding questions, discussion prompts, and that kind of thing. And it's nothing that we'll be jumping into like right away, because you can't really have that kind of conversation until you feel safe enough to have a conversation like that. And what I can offer, and that I think would be really good, is to, as we kind of roll out maybe some of those discussions, is to put it out there in our weekly that, hey, here's maybe some of the discussion topics so that parents and families are aware, and then you can have some of the same conversations at home. We can add that piece as well, just to give parents kind of a little more information about what's happening, because I think it's important that homeschool connection is really important there. School officially starts on Monday, September 14th. And the iPads will be kind of the way students will check in with their teachers and check the learning management system Canvas to find out what's happening that day. A lot of the work will be done via their iPad, but I'm sure not all of it.
So just in respect of time, it's now past 8 o'clock, and we want to thank our community for the questions. Want to thank you for joining us. And as Ms. Watt shared, there will be a 6th grade welcome orientation coming, and over the next 2 weeks, more information, modules, maybe some more live events as needed to make sure that our students and families are up to speed on how we can start the year for success. So please look for additional emails or links coming through. One of our most reliable forums for communication is the weekly email that will come out every Sunday. If you're not signed up or we don't have an accurate email in the system, please reach out to the school so we can update that for you. But we will also push out through Facebook and some social media, I think Twitter, links for events as well. So please stay connected with us. The more that we can be in partnership, the better we can serve your students, which is our absolute goal in this 6th through 8th grade journey, where our students are learning a whole lot about themselves as they're preparing for high school and for their future careers. So to all of our moderators, our tech experts behind the scenes, my co-presenter, Mrs. Watts, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, everyone.